Welcome to the Made for Agriculture podcast. Today's hosts are Adam Jones and Cameron Horine.
Welcome to another episode of the Made for Agriculture podcast. My name is Adam Jones.
And I'm Cameron Horine.
And we've got our second co-host back this morning. Good to see you, Cameron. Appreciate you jumping on this morning. So it is 2025, and we're back to our in-season podcast. I think these are really cool and very important. We're able to cover some very timely topics, pick the brains of some of the best agronomists that I know anyway, and get a chance to work with every day. And we've got all those folks on with us today. So I'm going to go around the horn. We've got Craig Russell in the kind of the north version of our territory. So everything north of Highway 36 in Missouri is what Craig covers. We got Jesse Surface down in the southeast corner with the big cotton bale behind his head this morning on his background. So he's repping his part of the state for sure. Love that. We got Shannon McClintock down in southwest Missouri, southeast Kansas, and Scott Wilburn already out safely parked on the side of the road this morning. So appreciate you jumping on here with us, Scott, there in central Missouri. So guys, it's after April 1st, 2025. It's doesn't seem like it should be so, but it's time to stick this crop in the ground. So I know everybody's kind of been running pretty hard up until the last couple of days. We picked up some rain, so I know there's been some planting progress in some parts of the territory. So we'll probably start off with those. So let's kind of start. Actually, let's start down in the boot heel with Jesse. That's probably where I would assume the most kind of progress and planting progress anyway has happened until very recently here. So Jesse, you got kind of an update?
Yeah, we'll start with a little bit of wheat. All of our wheat, we got all our nitrogen on, herbicide on. We were kind of behind this year. I mean, as everybody knows, we had a colder than normal year. Had that snow in February, where normally we'd have been running late January, early February. We just didn't get it done, which put our burn down behind and a lot of other stuff. But there, 1st of March, we finally got to get all of our wheat done. We started some burn down, and then about the 18th, guys started planting a few beans, just kind of getting stuff checked out. And they knew it was a little early. It was a little cool yet. So, but they just kind of took their time. But come the 20th, 25th, once we missed the rain, like it was full bore. I mean, guys planting corn, planting beans, rice went in the ground towards here, I don't know, 7-8 days ago. Beans I'm fine with. Corn I was a little nervous about, not necessarily because of the date, but when you looked at the forecast, we're sitting at 4.5 inches in 3 days with 2 more days of rain. Like, it just wasn't an idea. But it is what it is. The biggest thing is we've been so windy that there's going to be a lot of crop need to be sprayed whenever this weather straightens up. So I guess that's the big thing I'm looking for and to take home for guys is when we get these days that dry up and no wind, make sure you're getting something sprayed because it's going to need it.
Yeah, Jesse, quick question for you, and I guess this is why it's cool we do this podcast sort of on the fly, and all of our information is very recent. I guess I should have mentioned today is Friday, April 4th, but looking at the board this morning, beans down another 30 cents. I guess that's going to bring me to the question of you guys, you probably have the most acreage or crop flexibility of anybody that we're looking at on the screen here this morning. What are you seeing? Are guys switching from one crop to another? What do you feel like your acre split is down there this year?
Corn seems to be up a little bit, which kind of surprises me, but that's just, there's been a lot more talk of corn here the past 3 weeks than anything.
Right.
Now that could change. We stay wet on and off here for another 3 months. The cotton acre will come back hot and heavy, but.
Right. Yep. No, I was just interested. A lot of our territory, we don't have I-state type soils to be doing a lot of corn on corn. There's some guys that will run it in the rest of the state, but you seem to be able to have the most acreage flexibility. So that doesn't surprise me at all. So good stuff. Thank you, Jesse. Shannon, why don't you take it away? Tell us about wheat. And I know you guys have made some spring crop planting progress down there too.
Yeah, so the month of March was extremely busy for us. Up to that point, January, February, being wet and windy, there was hardly any field work done. There was some ground being worked when there was some chances, but March by far has been one of the busiest months we've had in a while. Corn. So the southern part of my territory, Cherokee County, Kansas, that southwest Missouri, kind of Berry County, that area, Newton County, we're 80 to 100% done on corn already. Guys just got started. Conditions were right. They just kept rolling. As you work north of my territory, so I'd say probably that line 160 that runs there through Lamar. North of that line, it backs off drastically, probably closer to 40% or less done. And a lot of that is just due to some rains that have come through. They've kind of been spotty. There's kind of been a line through there, as well as, just as you move north, it's just been a little slower getting those soils to warm up. There have been a few more beans put in early this year compared to what I would consider normal. So there are guys starting to try that out in our area a little bit more than what we've had in the past. To Jesse's point, the wind has been a problem. So a lot of this stuff's going in the ground without herbicide put on before. There's some burn down that did get done, but there's a lot of acres that are planted that have not been covered with a herbicide yet. So that's a major concern. On the wheat front, we've got most of our nitrogen on. I wouldn't say we're 100% done, but looking at cutting stems open, we're at hollow stem. We'll probably be at jointing the next 7 to 10 days, if not early next week. With that comes the concern of herbicides. So if we haven't had herbicides put on any yet, there's a lot of cutoffs that start being introduced there. So that's definitely a concern for me. Making sure we're following the label, making sure we're not causing any crop injury, because that is an important time in the crop stage where we could see substantial injury that affects the yield at the end of the season. That's really the main things that are going on down here.
Hey, Shannon, I know we swapped to a lot of single shot nitrogen because we were just so compressed for time. What did y'all end up doing?
About the same this year. Typically we follow the similar scenarios. Jesse, we'll be running our first pass on late January or February. We're putting our second pass on now. But just because of the sake of time, we were in March. We knew we had a lot of corn ground, soybean ground to get across. We just went ahead and did it all in one.
Yeah, that's something to think about on those acres that went in, Shannon, without herbicides being down. A lot of kind of pre-plant labels also include a pre-emergence label as well, and that crop's going to take a long time to get out of the ground. So hopefully everybody kind of prioritizes covering those acres before we actually get emergence, which, looking at the forecast is going to take a little while with these colder soils. So
absolutely.
All right, Scott, you're up.
Yeah, good morning. Been pretty spotty across Central over the last few weeks. One side of the region, may be able to get out and do something, while the other is, too wet to hardly even, walk out in the field. Even the rains of the last couple of days there's just been some real hard lines of, somebody gets 1.5 inches and a little bit further south, they're able to go the next day. So just a real mixed bag. Probably 10 days ago over on the western side, a fair amount went in the ground, kind of as our region reaches down towards Shannon, get kind of in that Adrian south of there. Other parts of the state, there was quite a bit of activity also over in, around Higginsville and that area, similar time period. We've already got some plots in. In that part of the world. Around home, which is Mexico for me, I don't know of anything that's been planted. It's just there's quite a bit of anhydrous still to even go on, and some of those activities, a lot of dry fertilizer still moving and those kind of things. So, there is some corn in the ground. I mean, I looked at some corn that had already sprouted and on its way. Early part of last week with one of my guys, Sam, down around South Adrian. So go back out that way and check on it probably early next week. It's kind of like the other guys. There are some beans in the ground. I don't know if there's as many as have been in previous years, but that's anecdotal from my part. We'll find that out probably here real soon as to how many's actually out there. Similar situation on the on wheat as what Shannon was saying. We are finding some jointed wheat here and there. We've got some areas where a fair amount of litter goes down and some other things that encourages quite a bit of fall and early spring growth. I think that's pushed some of those. Most of what we're finding is, as Shannon said, you got to split it open. You'll see that hollow stem. But I think by the time a lot of this ground dries up to where we can get back on it, we will be at joining. So, as far as our folks that are, usually scouting with a four-wheeler, we're gonna be parking those here real quick, if not already. It's kind of snuck up on me a little bit. I thought with the cooler temperatures, it would be a little more for our part of the world, what I would call normal, kind of that April 10th. But we did have quite a few heat units back in March, and I think that's driven a lot of that. The other thing, not a ton of these acres, but a lot of guys have a little bit, is we're already getting out in alfalfa fields and finding some little bitty weevil. I don't know of any in my region that we have pulled the trigger on yet, but I'd say we're probably within a week of probably trying to get out with some steward and with the residual and everything. Hopefully time it so we can knock out what's there and then protect us going forward. So we'll be watching that. The big conversation, just talking to guys. Well, Adam, as you were saying about acres, I know some acres have switched up, but overall, I feel like most of we've kind of held to our rotation. It's easy for us to talk about switching that up, but when you start, talking to a guy from the practical implications, a lot of times there's a reason that he's set everything up the way he has. Everything from logistics to landlord situations, and it's not as easy a deal to switch as sometimes we talk about. I know on macro sense, when we can look at acre swings, and we saw that with the report earlier this week. I guess it was this week. There has been a shift there, but for the most part, I think guys have kind of held to what their normal is.
Yeah, I'd agree, Scott. That's kind of what I see up here too, and part of it is obviously it's an economic consideration, right? I mean, that's why guys are talking about one versus the other. Is they've worked on balance sheets and they've figured out that one crop pencil is better than the other.
Sure.
The problem is if you have to adjust that top line yield number on corn at all because you're doing something that you hadn't planned on doing, there's no longer a balance sheet, preference one way or the other. So, I'd say you got 4 foot of black topsoil, you can do some things and probably do corn on corn or something like that and not affect your top line yield number. But most of our soils, if we have done no prep work and we're trying to scramble in there, do corn on corn or do corn where we hadn't planned on doing corn and haven't fertilized and stuff like that for it, then yeah, we're going to affect that total yield number, which affects your balance sheet at the end of the year, and you're back to, you might as well go ahead and plant soybeans like you had planned on. So a little different down in Jesse's part of the world where you got water and stuff like that too. So there's just a lot more flexibility in some of those soil types and growing conditions than what we have in other parts of the state. So I'm with you. I haven't seen too much. I'd say some of the guys that do 2 beans and then a year of corn or something like that may switch more. But I really haven't even seen that wholesale in our part of the world. So, but anyway, good stuff.
The other thing is just a lot of winter annuals to kill. That's been a big conversation the last week. Everything has started to pop, and fields that didn't look too bad, 2-3 weeks ago, rain and heat units, and they're nasty, and more rain in the forecast now. So a lot of conversations about best way to manage some of that stuff.
Yep. Absolutely. Yep. I even saw mainstream media news about why the fields are all purple and stuff like that. So, it definitely a lot of winter annuals out there this year for whatever reason. So thanks, Scott. Good stuff. All right, Craig, we went from south to north, and you're up, bud.
Yep. So thanks for having me. Yeah, well, our progress up here has been a little bit lighter than everybody else, as I'm sure most of you can imagine. There's been a few customers that we work with that have put some corn and beans into the ground, but that's been pretty minimal. Still a lot of dry fertilizer to go on up here, a little bit of anhydrous. Main thing I guess I would just say is, kind of working with some of those customers is just making sure we're doing things right when we do get in there with the planters. I know we've had a little bit of rain here this past week, so just making sure that soil conditions are good and we're not pushing it. So it's still plenty early, and There's no reason to go in and when it's too wet and create yourself some sidewall compaction. Also, just a lot of those herbicide applications, I know we've kind of alluded to that a little bit before too. So just making sure that we are working with our local retailers if you're not doing your own spraying, to where we can get those acres applied and use those residual herbicides to control those weeds. I know we had a lot of issues. Seemed like controlling water hemp last year, so being able to use some of those products that have multiple modes of action to control those weeds before we get beans emerged or anything is going to be pretty crucial. Using seed treatments as well, any of those add-ons when it's cool, wet conditions like this, planting early, you'll see a better return for your investment doing some of that. So.
Awesome. No, I think that's a good shout. The seed treatment thing, I guess the part I'd add to that is just, we've talked about it before. You can have the most glorious planting conditions that you've ever thought you were going to have, but this time of year, you get 4 days of 53-degree weather, within 7 days, and all of a sudden your beans take 3.5 weeks to come up. So, planting under good conditions is a good thing, obviously, but with delayed emergence like that, you just cannot predict what conditions those beans are going to come out of the ground in. So you kind of have to do a little risk mitigation and put some extra seed treatment on there when you're planting this time of year. So I guess another thing I'd add too was we've been so dry, Craig, in the north, and I make it no secret. That's where I live too, right? Northeast Missouri. So I'm a little more, but we've been very dry all winter. Everybody's kind of been gung ho. We did have a pretty good March. Everybody's been running hard. So I think everybody's still kind of in the dry mindset. We have gotten some rains here recently, and not just, on the sidewall compaction thing on the planting, but also, tillage too. Let's make sure we're not putting in compaction layers out there, because we did get a pretty good rain this week. Still pretty cool temperatures from my perspective in the forecast. It is not going to dry right back out immediately. You get those 50, 60-degree soils, they just do not dry out very quickly. And so it can be dry on top, and you can drag something through there and still put a compaction layer in. So I'd keep an eye on that too. Like I said, we're kind of used to everybody's in the pattern of, hey, it's been dry all winter, let's go. And so just kind of slowing down, make sure we're not doing something that's going to hang us up this year.
Yep. Well, one of the questions I had that really anybody can chime in on, and really it's, what are some of the things that need to watch, some call outs, as we mentioned, these cooler temperatures. I know here the next couple of days they're calling for low 30s, even some 20s for, I think, some of the north. We've got crops in there. Now it's wet. We're going to have cool temperatures. What are some watch outs or some things to just give people to think about when they're got seed in the ground? I know, Scott, you said you even got some already emerged. So what are some things guys may want to watch for on that as seed sits there in the ground for a while? Well, I can start this one. The first thing that comes to my mind is, early season diseases, seedling diseases. Craig mentioned seed treatments, and that right there, I mean, the seed treatments help us with some vigor, but the big thing that help us with is those seedling diseases that thrive in those 60-degree soils, moist soils. Anytime we set through disease training, and specifically around seedling diseases, we've always talked about cool, wet soils, and this is prime conditions for those, and not just soybeans, corn as well. So, a couple weeks ago when guys were throwing corn on the ground, there was the same scenario. There wasn't as much moisture, but there was cooler weather, and I was worried about cold injury on corn, where that corn starts growing, it hits a wall where it's below 50, starts growing back down, corkscrewing itself. That has a serious impact on stands. That can have a serious impact on yields at the end of the year, may even call for a replant. The unfortunate side of a lot of those things is it's a waiting game, because now we have to wait for the crop to come up. We have to wait and see what the stands actually look like before we can make a decision. So it may be, say it stops raining this weekend, it may be 2 weeks before we can even have a decision, another week to even have the seed in place to get what we need. So it could be another month before we have a stand like we need to. So huge implications, in my opinion. I agree, Shannon.
I was out with one of my folks earlier this week, and we were looking at some ground that's got cover crop on it, and it has had cover crop on it. In fact, I ended up calling Adam for a consult on this one. But we were already finding slugs out there. So, just talking about your forecast, I mean, there's not a lot of things you can do in that situation. I mean, that's normally something we find later. So I was really surprised to see them in what was still March, I guess. And there again, I guess just those warm weathers. I don't know as much about, I guess, slug life cycles. Maybe I should. But if you're dealing with any of that kind of stuff, cover crops, I hate blanket recommendations because everybody, whether you sowed something at 20 pounds versus 50 plus pounds, makes a difference. People have different setups on their planters, so I hate making just totally blanket recommendations, but I guess the one that I would kind of throw out there, and this is easier said than done, I get it, but if you're in one of those situations where you think you may be dealing with some of those kind of pressures and just staying wet and even slugs and that kind of stuff, trying to pick a forecast where you can get seed out of the ground as quick as possible is probably the best the best medicine for that. If that crop is just sitting there and not growing, they have a field day with it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd agree, Scott. And caution on the blanket prediction thing here, but I'd say on those acres that are going to corn, if there's any sort of cover crop out there, that's next dry day that we get, we need to be out there probably terminating that. I know that's on my to-do list now. I mean, basically, we still haven't gotten enough growth, I don't think, to really affect anything negatively this year. But it needs to be burned down sooner rather than later, because you're one day of being out of the field away from missing it, and then you're gonna have a big mess on your hands. So it's all about timing on all that stuff. So
I would argue a field with heavy weed pressure is in the same scenario as a cover crop field like that.
Sure, could be. Yeah, absolutely, for sure. So, guys, anything else before we wrap her up for the week? Excellent. Well, I appreciate all of your time this morning, jumping on here early and getting some updates out to everyone listening. We will be back in 2 weeks, hopefully with probably a lot more planning progress. I'm sure the weather will have changed, the markets will have changed, and we'll have different things to talk about. So anyway, appreciate all you guys again jumping on this morning. Be safe out there today, and appreciate everybody's time who jumped on here and listened to us. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to Made for Agriculture, brought to you by MFA, your whole farm solution.